Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Spin Boldak. Remember that name. Sounds exotic, but you will hear a lot of it these couple of days and maybe going ahead. It is a place, it's a district in Afghanistan, eastern, southeastern Afghanistan, bordering Pakistan. Spin Boldak also is vital because it has the second most important transit point between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Afghanistan, as we know, is a landlocked country. Its goods, its people have to go out to the Arabian Sea, and that has to be done through Pakistan mostly, although some of it can be done from its western borders through Iran, but mostly it is done from Pakistan because most of the inhabited areas, populated areas are on this side of Afghanistan. The second of these, second most important, is Spin Boldak. And as we speak now, Spin Boldak has been taken over by the Taliban after bitter fighting. Afghan government claims that they have taken it back, but as usually happens in these cases, this keeps exchanging hands. So yesterday at some point, the Taliban put up their own flag, the white flag with the Arabic scroll on it in black script, but also the Pakistani flag, because Pakistanis may be shy of displaying their connection with the Taliban, but Taliban have no such compunctions. So those pictures you can see. One reason also we are talking about Afghanistan for the third time this week. One, that this is the most important geostrategic thing happening in our region by far. This will have far-reaching consequences, and I will also give you some instances from history as we go ahead, but also today because it just feels, the hurt feels a little bit professional and personal, because one of the finest photographers in India, Danish Siddiqui, photographer of Reuters, you've seen some great pictures of him. He won the Pulitzer with his team in 2018 for his coverage of the Rohingya refugee crisis. He had been doing very brave journalism in Afghanistan in the same area, in the same Spin Boldak area, going out with Afghan special forces troops on raids and missions and documenting that with his camera. And he'd been posting these fantastic threads, which were also quite scary because you could see the danger that he was encountering. In fact, one of his pictures, one of his videos actually has an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, hit the Humvee, the top of the Humvee that he was riding. Unfortunately, did not last long enough. He died late last night or early this morning. So commiserations to his family, and also it's a great loss for journalism, but it also reminds you of the risks and the dangers that the journalists deal with when they try and bring you the real story. Not Suna Sunaya Hal, but Aankhon Dekha Hal. So with that tribute to Danish Siddiqui, I go ahead. So Danish Siddiqui died in the middle of this battle. Why is this battle so crucial? I will first of all tell you how temperatures have been raised over this battle. So Amrullah Saleh, who is the first vice president of Afghanistan, he's been tweeting since yesterday, and he's a wonderful person, very articulate, has been in intelligence for a long time before that, smart man and very brave man. So he tweeted yesterday that Pakistan Air Force has now begun to support the Taliban, and Pakistan Air Force has conveyed it to the Afghan pilots that if they come anywhere within 10 kilometers of the international border of the Durand Line, which Pakistan sees as the international border, Afghanistan does not recognize it. If you come within 10 kilometers of that, you will have to face air-to-air missiles. And air-to-air missiles, as you know these days, are mostly beyond visual range. So that is to keep the Afghan Air Force away. Why? Because as we had told you 2 days back, in the first of our 3 episodes on Afghanistan this week, that the big differential between the Taliban and the Afghan forces is air power, because Taliban have no air power, Afghan forces have air power. So Afghan government wants to use its air force, its attack helicopters, strafing, bombing aircraft to keep the Taliban at bay at Spin Boldak. But the Pakistanis are not coming in to support the Taliban, they are not bombing the Afghan forces, but by saying that there is a no-fly zone. So Amrullah Saleh says that they have imposed an illegal no-fly zone within Afghan territory. Now, that was denied by the Pakistanis immediately, but once again, Amrullah Saleh has insisted, and he said, I can give you accounts from Afghan pilots who've got messages as they've been flying in that area that stay away at least 10 kilometers away, otherwise we'll shoot at you with our beyond visual range missiles from the Pakistani side. And obviously Afghan pilots will not take that chance because the two air forces are completely mismatched. Now, what happens in this case is that this 10-kilometer area, this is the area exactly on the border. This is very vital. You might say, Afghan government owns Kabul, Herat, Mazar-e-Sharif, Jalalabad, all the big cities, even Kandahar city. Why are they bothered about this place called Spin Boldak? Spin Boldak, by the way, you can find many places in Afghanistan called Spin something. So, Spin means white. Spin is white, Boldak means desert. So, white desert, and this area is like that. Sometimes when you fly from India to the west, you will fly over this area and you will find long expanse of completely barren land. The way I mentally calculated, I think that, and if I look at the in-flight map, I sort of visualize that we are first flying over somewhere over Chagai in Pakistan, which is their nuclear test site or thereabouts, and then crossing into this part of Kandahar and this region. This is a very barren desert. Now, Spin Boldak is important. Look at the map of Afghanistan. If you look at the map of Afghanistan, once again, third time this week, it's very clear that it's a landlocked country. Landlocked country with one access to the sea. That is the Arabian Sea. Arabian Sea or the Persian Gulf from the Iranian side. Now, since most of its population, commerce, activity is on its eastern side or on its center, not on its western side, although the city of Herat is there, but not very much else. So, its dependence on the transit routes through Pakistan is almost total. So, generally I would say Afghanistan has about 5 key transit points that give Afghans an access to the seas. There is another transit point up in the north that gives them access through land borders into Uzbekistan and further into Russia, etc., but that does not take them into the seas. So, for a landlocked country, the most important ones are these. So, of these, there is Herat. Herat is on the Iranian border. There is Farah, Kunduz. Then, most importantly, there is at the Khyber Pass, Torkham, that area which is next to Jalalabad, which is like eastern Afghanistan. And then in the southeast, way down in the southeast, almost parallel to Quetta in Baluchistan, is Spin Boldak. Spin Boldak is the second busiest transit point between Afghanistan and its neighboring countries. In fact, estimates tell you at this point that when the transit functions there, about 900 to 1100 trucks a day cross that point. So, what have the Taliban done? Taliban have already captured, or at least it has changed hands a few times. I can't guarantee to you at this point who has it, because the Iranians also have anxieties about that. But they have captured the transit points at Farah, Kunduz and Herat. And they desperately want Spin Boldak. Torkham, Khyber may be tough for them because the terrain is not available there. Pakistanis may not be able to help them as much as they can do here. That area is not as remote as this one, but the fact is, if they capture Spin Boldak also, right now they stop traffic there. If they capture it and once again traffic starts, because Afghanistan is a country run by warlords. Warlords have to finance themselves. Financing themselves is by extortion, by thuggery, by growing heroin poppy, by doing all kinds of things. But the easiest way to make money for warlords is by charging taxes, by charging cesses. So, what do? Landlocked country, you capture a transit point. You capture a transit point, then you put a charge on all the trucks. So, effectively, you are collecting a tax which government could have collected, so you become the government of that place. And that's why these transit points are so vital. And that's why Spin Boldak is a life and death battle between the government forces and the Taliban, because the government forces know that if the Taliban get it, the Taliban will also use it to get a lot of cash for themselves, because the country has to go on, and warlord run societies, countries, they find their modus vivendi. So what happens is, after a while, trucks will come in, trucks will go out, these guys will run the checkpost, everybody will look the other way. So you will go from one warlord to another warlord paying your tribute on the way, and that will undermine the central government's authority. So if you try to understand this, I can take you back to a story that we read maybe when we were very young reporters by one of Delhi's Dada crime reporters. If I remember correctly, I might be wrong, but if I remember correctly, it was A.R. Wig of the Hindustan Times. Story on how police stations in Delhi are auctioned. So we would have thought, in our naive way of thinking, that, oh, New Delhi will be the most valuable police station. Auction means for which police officers pay the largest amount of bribe to be posted there. But then we figured the most lucrative police stations, which got the highest quote-unquote bidding, were, say, Shahadra. They were what is now called as Singhu border. Why? Because that is where transit takes place. If government authorities or the police are corrupt, that is where you make the most money. So that is the way you look at these transit points around Afghanistan, particularly when the authority of the central government wanes. And that is why this big fighting at Spin Boldak. Now, other stuff is happening in Afghanistan. Americans are now bringing in aircraft to take those Afghans who worked for them out. That is about 2,500 Afghans. So they are calling it Op Allies Refuge. So I think they'll take them to their allied European countries for now, and ultimately they take them to America. But the rest of Afghanistan is being left to their devices, and you can see the shape of things to come. I will just share, give me a moment, I will pause for a few seconds, watch this little video. It is very scary and I know it's triggering, but watch it because this gives you an idea of what lies ahead. This is a Taliban asking somebody, are you a Hazara? And if the answer is yes, he shoots the guy. Why? Because Hazaras are also Muslims. It's not shooting him because he's non-Muslim, but Hazaras are Shia. So this is now a situation of complete anarchy where everybody carries a gun in Afghanistan. Again, there is information coming in that is Badakhshan up north, northeast, which the Taliban have mostly taken over. They are telling native Kyrgyzs that either convert to our version of our religion or leave the place. Many of them have taken refuge in neighboring Tajikistan. Now, you might ask me, why is the Pakistanis so obsessed with the region? I told you, in fact, just yesterday I told you that Pakistan is now caught in a situation that we might find in a tourist trap. When you want to buy a t-shirt, somebody says $30, I'll give 10, and the guy says take it. But then what do you do with it? Because you think I have still been gypped. And that's what's happened to Pakistan, because Americans are gone, just as the Russians had gone earlier. The Afghan government may collapse, just as Najibullah's government had collapsed. But do the Pakistanis now have the ability to put out the fire that they put on? So for them, the only way of doing that is to keep the Taliban fully under their control. Can they do it? I have my doubts, but you never know. And in any case, minds in Pakistani GHQ are not known to have some super special IQ. They are very smart tactically, but usually they've been poor strategically. So maybe they are making one of those mistakes. But there is a legacy issue there, and the legacy issue is the Pak-Afghanistan border. Now, Pak-Afghanistan border is marked by the Durand Line. Now, a lot of the border problems in our subcontinent owe their origin to the British Raj. So, Durand Line was drawn in 1893 by Mortimer Durand. How was it drawn? British Raj, all-powerful, and Afghan government, the Amir of Afghan at that point, Abdul Rahman Khan. They signed this agreement and they signed off on this line dividing the border between imperially controlled India and Afghanistan. But there was one catch there. Afghanistan was treated by the British as a sovereign country because the British had had a checkered history with Afghanistan, fighting wars, not winning everything, suffering some disasters. So after that, the British had decided to let Afghanistan at least have the pretense of being a sovereign country. Why do I say a pretense of sovereign country? Because they continued to control Afghanistan's foreign and diplomatic affairs, typical British trick. So what did they do? They used that power. Here is a sovereign country, although I control his foreign and diplomatic policies, I get this sovereign country to negotiate with me and sign off on this line called the Durand Line. What did Durand Line do? Durand Line goes right across the Pakhtun territories. So it divided the same tribes, the same kinsmen, the same families through a line that the British arbitrarily drew and got the Afghans who were under their control to sign off on. So the Afghans have never accepted that line, and a lot of the Pathans also think on both sides that I should have the right of free passage on this side or that. And that is a big sore point with Pakistan. Now, when we think of Pakistan and its security problems, we look at Pakistan's east, that is towards India. Most of those border problems with India are Pakistan's creation, because if Pakistan gave up its claims on whatever it claims now in Kashmir, most of those problems will disappear. But on this side, Pakistan has problems with the other side, that is the Afghans. So no Afghan regime as yet has accepted the Durand Line. Even the Taliban, when they were there in power, never formally accepted or endorsed the Durand Line, because it's also a very emotive issue in Afghanistan. It's also a very emotive issue among the Pakhtuns. And remember, the Taliban draw most of their manpower, most of their ideological power, most of their leadership from the Pakhtun tribes. So Pakistanis have this concern. In fact, even before the Durand Line was drawn, a lot of the regions which are now Pakistan's regions, for example, Kurram Agency that we spoke about just yesterday, that is where the Pakistani patrol was ambushed and 15 soldiers were killed. So Kurram, Quetta, Khyber, these were regions that Afghanistan ceded to the British, to the Imperial India under the British. And there is nostalgia in Afghanistan as well that these were our territories. So Pakistanis think that now this is the time to sort this problem once and for all, so at least secure their western borders. That is the big challenge right now, and that is why they are getting so actively involved in this. Now, I know sometimes you like history, so I'll tell you some very briefly. 1879 was the Second Anglo-Afghan War. The treaty that came up after the Second Anglo-Afghan War, that led to the drawing of the 1893 Durand Line. Once again, one side was the winning side, the other side was not the winning side. I will not say the losing side, but the other side was not the losing side. In 1901, that is just 8 years after that, the British transformed that entire region in Imperial India, which is now part of Pakistan, into a new province called Northwest Frontier Province. Most of that is now Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. So that gives you a little perspective on how this area is interesting. And also, since we are talking history, I'll take you a little further back also. Now, Kandahar. Spin Boldak is also the gateway to Kandahar. Spin Boldak has highways going to Kandahar, Chaman in Pakistan. Some of you might remember, particularly those who are a little bit older, they might remember that in the past when India did not grow very good grapes, grapes in India used to come from Chaman. So even your fruit wala in the street would say, Chaman ke angoor aa gaye. So Chaman is part of Pakistan which has a lot of orchards and things. Spin Boldak has highways to Chaman, to Quetta and to Kandahar. Kandahar is a crucial place for this subcontinent. Even from Mughal times, Akbar was partly brought up there, Humayun had left his family partly there, partly in Kabul after he lost power, lost the Gaddi in Delhi. After that, the Mughals always controlled it. It was much later, in early 17th century, that the Safavid Empire from Iran, from Persia, came and defeated the Mughals and got the Mughals out of Kandahar. After that, Mughals under Shah Jahan made 3 massive efforts to win Kandahar back. In fact, Mughal armies under Shah Jahan laid 3 sieges around Kandahar. All 3 failed. between 1649 and 1653. The first two were led by Aurangzeb, Prince Aurangzeb. Those failed, and third time Shah Jahan organized his largest army, and he thought this time he was going to win for sure, and he sent his favorite son, who was also his heir apparent, that is Dara Shikoh. And he was hoping that Dara Shikoh will now have a victory in his name, so that will legitimize his claim to the throne. But once again, that assault also failed, and Kandahar remained with the Safavids. And as history goes, after Aurangzeb died in 1707 and the Mughal Empire declined, Ahmad Shah Durrani, who in India generally is known as Ahmad Shah Abdali, he took over Kandahar, made it his capital, and he then from there led the invasion of India in 1761, where he defeated the Marathas in the third battle of Panipat. So just to get a little perspective in terms of where we are. So sometimes, just as you need to know the current news, the geography and history are also equally important. So on that note, I will conclude this episode of Cut the Clutter. But before I go away, I'll share a bunch of pictures with you. And these are about 5-6 pictures, the best of the pictures taken by Danish Siddiqui, who unfortunately died while covering the fighting in Spin Boldak, Kandahar area today. So the first 3 pictures are of Rohingya refugees. Remember, that's what got them the Pulitzer Prize. Then there is this gunman during the anti-CA protest who's standing alone, shooting at people. Later it turned out to be Ram Gopal Bhakt, has lately been arrested by Haryana police for a hate speech. Then there is another picture from CAA, anti-CAA agitations of people beating up a Muslim man. And also very striking pictures of migrants walking from Rohtak to Jhansi, 500 kilometers. And finally the picture imprinted on all our minds, that's of a mass cremation at the height of the second wave of pandemic at a crematorium in eastern Delhi. Once again, commiserations to his family. He is truly a martyr to the cause of brave journalism.